The chat was all the talk today.
The security breach that allowed a journalist to join a chat in which the Trump National Security Team was planning an attack on Houthi rebels in Yemen. The president downplayed it, insisting there was nothing classified in the chat, which used the texting app known as Signal.
On Capitol Hill, members of Congress did what they usually do, choosing sides and adjectives. Republicans call the breach a mistake.
But Democrat Mark Warner chose sloppy, careless, incompetent, and topped it all off with fiasco.
Republican John Kennedy said most Americans don't care about the breach, but fellow Republican Lindsey Graham acknowledged we dodged a bullet.
And CBS News has learned the administration was warned recently not to use the Signal app because it is not secure. Ed O'Keefe is at the White House. Ed?
Good evening, guys. That's right. A little more than 2 weeks before that journalist was accidentally added to the group text, CBS News has learned the National Security Agency issued this memo warning against using Signal. Because it's so popular, the NSA warned, Signal could be a, quote, high-value target to intercept sensitive information. President Trump insisted today the texting troubles caused by his top officials weren't a big deal.
There was no classified information, as I understand it.
But Atlantic Magazine editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg, who was added accidentally to the Signal group chat, says top officials were discussing sensitive, secretive war plans to bomb Houthi rebels in Yemen.
I found it completely improbable that the top national security leadership in the United States would be discussing on a commercial messaging app the possible imminent attack on another country, and that they would mistakenly, I assume mistakenly, invite the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic Magazine into their discussion.
Goldberg reported that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shared highly sensitive operational details about the March 15 strikes, including targets, weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and when they'd be fired. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who originally invited Goldberg to the chat, was one of many Trump allies today who sought to discredit him.
This journalist, Mr. President, wants the world talking about more hoaxes and this kind of nonsense rather than the freedom that you're enabling.
Democrats on Capitol Hill were infuriated the administration wasn't taking any responsibility for the mistake, grilling National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe, both of whom were part of the group chat.
Director Ratcliffe, this was a huge mistake, correct?
No.
This is utterly unprofessional. There's been no apology. There has been no recognition of the gravity of this error.
Gabbard acknowledged she was traveling abroad during part of the chat, as was the president's envoy to the Middle East and Russia, Steve Witkoff, who was in Moscow at the time. Chris O'Leary worked in counterterrorism at the FBI.
This is signaling to the entire world that our most senior leaders have poor operational security, and there's an opportunity here to maybe pursue them.
Now, Ed, what else have we learned about how the White House uses these types of apps available to the public?
Well, first off, we know the president still uses a personal cell phone. Unclear if he discusses or receives any sensitive information or if there's any protection on that phone. As for Signal, we know administration officials today were reassessing how often to use it, but it is quite popular with Trump administration officials, as it was during the Biden era, because they discuss internally and externally all sorts of issues on it. The Trump team sees it as a convenient tool that is secure because there's been no evidence of it ever being hacked.
Ed, Maurice and I were talking earlier about the fact the White House says there's no classified information here, and we both said so they'd be okay with releasing it and letting Goldberg release it. Are they okay with it?
Well, not quite. Look, they're in cleanup mode. They acknowledge this is a mistake, but they are in no way encouraging Goldberg to release the rest of the information he has, believing private conversations should have and should remain private.
One more thing here, Ed, just 15 seconds or so. What would happen if a low-level staffer did this kind of thing? Would they still have a job?
If it was someone in the military, they'd likely be court-martialed and kicked out. Intelligence, diplomatic, and military officials, no. You don't share classified or sensitive information on commercially available apps because it's against the law.